forgot what I was going to say. I did. I just drew a blank. And I almost said a tagline from another video, from another channel. Okay, so anyways, hi, I'm David Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild. And today I'm here with my good friend James. And we've both been role-playing for a long time together. James, thanks for coming out.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And, well, basically, this is actually my first of my RPG discussion interviews. I had a few other ones on the channel, but this is kind of like my actual first official one where hopefully I can do a whole series with everybody that I know and maybe some people I don't. Today we're going to talk about apocalypse campaigns and games in general. We'll probably just end up talking about rifts because that's what's kind of on our mind here lately, because we intend to start playing some rifts in probably about the next 5 or 6 months. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you, James. I know a little bit, we just talked about it kind of, but how many years have you been playing?
We're going to go with about 30 years. I'm in my late 40s, so we'll just say that.
And I'm half a century, and I won't say anything more than that. Cool. Now, what got you actually started in role-playing games in general?
Honestly, I think alleviation of boredom started it. Excuse me.
It's okay.
You know, just rolling from cops and robbers, imagination, kids' games, straight into, hey, we can do this with some rules and some organization, and it's still just as fun, maybe better. I was introduced by a guy named Aaron who had been in the Army, and he had discovered role-playing while he was in the Army, being very bored. And he came home to our small town in Texas and brought this idea with him, and introduced a bunch of us younger guys to the hobby.
Awesome. And it's usually always how it is. That someone else seems to introduce you.
Yes.
And I don't know how my friend, I got a friend, Doug, he's in the Navy, and I don't know where in the world he is. I mean, literally, he could be anywhere in the world. And he introduced me to Robotech because we both watched a lot of Robotech growing up. And I met him. My dad was in the Air Force. Got a lot of cool Air Force posters and stuff. And he's like, hey, let's check out these role-playing games. We can play Robotech. I was like, cool. And then we played like Fast Star Trek. We played TSR Star Frontier. So a lot of those all the time. Some Star Wars by West End. And but I'm not even sure where he picked it up. I think he just picked it up out of the blue. But I think as role players go, like for me and you, there's not too much history before us other than the guys who originally started D&D and who originally started that where it came from wargaming over to role playing.
Yes.
And so we're actually kind of still really at the beginning of it, and because I don't remember a lot of people talking about it.
Yeah, I think my first edition of D&D was the second edition. That's what was there when I was getting into D&D, and so that's still a sweet spot.
Yeah, our first edition was basic because we found all the books and all the game stores used. Like both and the whole red box for like $10 basically.
Yeah.
And now I could sell it for $50 or $100 in really bad beat up condition. But we didn't. We played a lot of RP of other systems before we actually got into Dungeons & Dragons itself. Because I remember, and I'm trying not to be too long-winded, but you know me, I love to talk a lot.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
So, anyways, I probably got into it role-playing in 6th grade, and by the time I got down here, it's like my junior or senior year, and my folks had rented a camper, and we've been playing I've been playing Star Trek, Fast Star Trek, Battletech, MechWarrior, West End games, Star Wars, all the Palladium stuff. We're playing Palladium Fantasy in my junior year, because I still live with my parents. Had a camper, and so we were all crammed in the camper so my parents could have some peace and quiet. And we're doing we gamed from like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, till like the next day, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. But at some point in the middle of the night, Billy stops me, and Billy, he says, hey, has any of us here actually played Dungeons & Dragons? And we're playing Palladium Fantasy, mind you. We've been doing it for a while. And we're all like, no. And he's like, we should probably fix that before someone finds out. So then, of course, we went and bought it. And I've never met anyone. Of course, I haven't been in too many games with anyone who actually ran advanced D&D with me. I haven't been in too many of those games. I've always ran them. But he was really good about just playing world building. I think that was really his
I got to
passion.
play one session. It was Tegel Manor with Billy.
Oh,
So yeah, I'm
yeah.
experienced his GMing. Yes,
It
Billy
was pretty cool. And I don't know if he did it with you, but he could sit there and he could just do encumbrance. Like, oh man, I don't know if I got too much stuff. Hang on, let me see. And he just moving his fingers, looking up in the sky at some mystical calculator. And no, you got to drop this, that, and the other. Now, he could have just been doing like what I do. I'm just kind of BSing my way through it. But I don't know. It seemed pretty believable to me. So I liked it. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. So I'm coming back now to Apocalypse campaigns and games. So there are different ways to end or at least forever change the world. And I love Apocalypse games because of that reason. It's just something about it. I think it's the struggle, testing your metal, so to speak, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I like the fact that most Apocalypse games usually seem very modern and have sci-fi and horror elements.
So do you favor the actual change itself or the tension of the build-up before the events kick off?
I've done both.
Yes,
and
a lot of games are based in very heavily in that tension beforehand.
Now, I have done there have been several games where I'm already in it, like Rifts and stuff like that, similar games.
And it's your post-apocalypse there, yes.
But with the coming of Chaos Earth by Palladium, I was intrigued by how they had the build-up. Now, theirs went very quick, and then we're just basically post-apocalyptic. But I spread it out a little more, and I had I think it was John, Glenn, and Josh. And it was 3 people. It was great because it ran quick because I had fewer people. And they were Marine Force Recon, and I had a lot of regular missions planned up. And I tried really hard to stay modern and not let anything weird in until I was ready until all the apocalyptic events began happening.
Yes.
And then it kind of snowballed and went, and then we were full-blown post-apocalypse with weird stuff going on. And that was probably one of the most intriguing and fun and self-fulfilling games for me because I really had a good time doing it. And I really like that lead-in. I think that build-up, that kind of lends something to it, I think.
Yep. I do recall some of those sessions, some of those games.
So, what do you think now? Rifts is very supernatural based. They base everything kind of on the supernatural, I think. And of course, there's a lot of high tech stuff. But what do you do you have a particular favorite for apocalyptic games?
Well, to be honest, in the late '90s, I was in a group with a bunch of players, all more advanced players who had been playing for some time. We were originally started out playing Vampire the Masquerade, which has that end of millennium, something's going to happen, tension going on. One of the other guys started running Werewolf the Apocalypse. Matt was a Rifts gamer. He had the whole Rifts book collection. That's where I kind of discovered Rifts, I think. And he was running a Rifts campaign. So there was a lot of that pre-tension before things kick off. And then with Rifts, of course, it's kind of, this is the mess you're left to deal with afterwards. I do love Rifts. I think the setting's great. It's definitely an anything goes. You can do whatever you want. You can have a lot of fun with that. I know a lot of people struggle with the rules, but that is what it is. You can make do with that however you need to, as a group, as a DM. Honestly, my favorite approach to if I really want to do an apocalypse thing, and I know it's cliche and cheesy, but I still like the simple elegance of your zombie apocalypse, because the monster is not necessarily the shambling undead outside, but the guy you've locked yourself in the shelter with. I think that's the joy of the original Romero Night of the Living Dead. I think that's the whole point of it, really, is what's going on in here, the sort of 12 Angry Men vibe of what's really going on.
Personal conflict between everybody.
Yes, who is going to do anything to survive, and who's going to keep their morals, who's going to survive. Mere survival's not enough sort of mindset, and who's just going to kill you just as fast as the zombies, just to run outside and get eaten at the last minute.
I every few years I go through I recycle through all the zombie movies and watch them just because I think it's really where a lot of it started. Or at least I feel like, anyways, and it just kind of went off from there.
Yes, that, and of course, and there's all this fun influence that seeps in from all the crap we watched in the 80s on VHS.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Nightbreed and Chud and and all the fun stuff that
Killdozer. I just rewatched that Killdozer the other night.
Nice.
Not of course the sci-fi, the old sci-fi movie, you know.
I watched Screamers the other night. So.
Oh, that was good too. I like Screamers. That was really cool. I wasn't super crazy about the sequels, but the original one that was really neat.
Well, I mean, and Peter Weller. I mean, if Buckaroo Banzai's in it, I'm going to pay attention.
Oh yeah, I know, right? Oh, it's so good.
Where's that role-playing game? That's my question.
Oh, you know, I don't know. Of all the properties I've seen, I don't know if I've seen a Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah.
There might be. I'd have to go look and see. I mean, man, they made Indiana Jones. I'm sure they're going to make Buckaroo Banzai.
You would think, right? I missed cool. That one. That's my weakness right there.
Remember, no matter where you go, there you are.
There you are.
Oh, man.
But if that movie wasn't written like a session, I don't know what was.
Oh, it does seem quirky enough.
Yes.
Somebody's like, hey, I want to do this. Well, I don't know. Go ahead and roll. Oh, 20. Yep, I guess you get to do it.
I'm playing a cowboy rock star bard.
Yeah, it sounds like somebody just made that up.
Aren't we
spot.
all?
Yeah, we are. Oh, my gosh. Let's see.
And a nuclear physicist.
To boot, yeah. How do you have time for all that?
Really?
Must have been Cyberpunk. He just come out jacks in. We just never see him jack in and download phys.
Pretty sure that was the premise for like the band Bad Religion was a bunch of scientists, let's form a punk band.
Oh.
Because they watched Buckaroo Banzai one too many times. But I digress.
Let's see. Going back to that werewolf and the vampire where you were playing, did you guys start, because I know you said there was that tension, that build up, but did you guys ever get to that spot where it was full-blown apocalypse into maybe post-apocalyptic, or was the playing field mostly that big build-up? Was that pretty much where it was?
I think the build-up towards that was really just a background tension. We played very intimate, personal games. I really encouraged my guys to develop their characters and to follow the characters' interests, and found ways to work that into the broader campaign. Dustin, who ran Werewolf, his was very much an action-adventure story. It was always fast-paced. It was never boring. There was a lot of fighting and a lot of, this is not going to go the way you think it does, so you're going to have to think, you're going to have to fight more intelligently than just tanks and healers. That's how he ran things. And then, of course, Rifts was just absolute chaos, which was the point.
Yeah.
No, it was, but the apocalypse itself was always more of a background tension for me. Now I've played in an unnamed GM's Chaos Earth campaign, and that was definitely right in the mix of all the mess, and we got to see some weird creatures, some weird monsters, and really struggle dealing with everything going wrong. You went from the contemporary mindset of how to deal with problems and situations to situations and problems that were unprecedented, and all the things you were guaranteed to count on in the past just completely breaking down. There was no medical support, no military, no police. So you were trying to figure everything out and do everything on your own, basically with a character that wasn't designed or built or grew up in that environment. So it's a struggle. It's an interesting challenge.
It most definitely is. And there are some games that I've been in where I've made a character with a very particular kind of bent, and I feel like sometimes I was led more down a path of I had to be more, like, my character was kind of techie.
Yes.
And I kind of was hoping that I could kind of lean on that a little more. And
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I feel like I went down a road where it was supposed to become more metaphysical, and I really wasn't down for that. And but I'm always happy to play, so I just kind of run with it. But I really like when I make a character, and I struggle with this as a game master. And what I just previously mentioned was me as a player, of course. But as a game master, I always want to make sure that everybody's getting the attention, especially in something apocalyptic, that they get to use their character how they built them, and that can be kind of a struggle.
Absolutely, and the bigger the group, the harder it is to give everybody time. I mean, you and I have both been in these groups that end up with 7, 8 players. Some people playing multiple characters or playing NPCs, and it's just overwhelming. And it really does break down into a war game, a combat encounters situation, just to have something everybody can participate in, because giving everybody the spotlight means nobody gets any time.
And when you figure, even with a table of 4, if you give everybody 5 minutes, someone's waiting 15.
Yes, it's unfortunate, but one of the things that I liked about the group we had back in Washington, back in the late 90s, was that we didn't have any serious jobs. We weren't really adulting quite at full scale yet. So we had a lot of time to spend together, and it'd be like, hey, I want to play, but the group's not here, so let's just talk about your character. What do you want to do? How are you working towards these side goals? Basically spending a lot of time on downtime individually with the players that we don't have the spare time to do anymore. And it would be a full-time job with a large group, even if you did have the time. But I do enjoy the smaller scale, more intimate, focus in on a handful of characters, especially seeing under that tension, whether it's building up to an apocalypse or everything has already hit the fan. How is it affecting their characters? How is it changing the outlook they started with to what are they now? How do they see things now? If your character was just a guy who wanted to get a loan and open a restaurant and use that as a base for influence peddling, and then the whole world's on fire, that plan is completely garbage. What are you going to do now? And is survival enough? Is just surviving enough?
I had, I don't know why I thought about it. I just wanted to kind of go back because I was thinking about and when you have a group of guys like that, who's got the restaurant, everything goes to crap, then what next? Is it just survival? What do you do? And then we have everybody like that, then it can be very chaotic. And I remember I had went with one of the small games I had, the 3-player game with John, Glenn, and Josh. They were all, like I said, Marine Force Recon. What was cool is it was actually very easy. I found it much easier since they're all part of a unit.
Well, and those guys, too, have a lot of chemistry as players together. They played in a lot of groups, and they're not really selfish attention hog type players. Those guys are all players you want in your group.
Yeah.
And they kind of support. They either directly support each other or they directly attack each other. Either way, the drama's great.
Yeah, absolutely. But they keep it definitely at just a table level, an in-game level.
Yes.
There's usually nothing bad afterwards.
It's not like the thief that's constantly stealing from the party that he's a member of.
Yeah, I find that very distracting. Even as a game master, as a player, I just find it distracting overall. But let's see. So, now that vampire game you were in, is that what did you say you ran that specifically?
I did run that one,
okay.
Yes.
Now, that's what I thought you said. Now, is there any other kind of apocalyptic scenario campaign that you've run recently?
I haven't run it yet. I've spent a lot of time writing actually 2 campaigns parallel for different systems. But I do want to run a dark fantasy end of the world campaign. And there's any number of systems that it could be done with. It's really about the flavor and having a system for the world to fall apart, which is basically a random chart of cataclysmic events that you roll on,
And you've told me about this before. We've talked extensively. You've spoken extensively about it. And I have always, as much as I love apocalypse games, I've always tried to dabble with that in fantasy. And I feel like it's been bad. It's been okay-ish. But I just feel like I have trouble trying to put that apocalypse into fantasy, try to overlay it with that fantasy world. I just can't do it. I can't do it for some reason. But anything else, I feel like I got a good handle on just because it's modern and up. But fantasy, I can't do it. But now, how do you feel about fantasy and Apocalypse?
Well,
Is it the system? Is it how you present it?
Yes, and it has a lot to do with, like, so if you were to use 5th edition to do the end of a fantasy world campaign, I would not use, like, Faerun and the Sword Coast, because there's so much history. Personally, I hate to take all that and pile it up and then smash it with a sledgehammer. I would use a generic world that didn't give any more detail than was absolutely necessary. I don't need to go into a ton of world building because we're about to break it down. I need to have basic principles, basic concepts of how everything runs, so that when something happens, the sun turns red, plants stop growing. How do we deal with that?
Now with that's a pretty good example right there, just because that would affect everyone in a fantasy world.
Yes.
And I think that's part of my trouble in a fantasy world is with magic and psionics. And
this is coming from a guy who took all magic out of a fantasy world at the end of a campaign now. Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, I know. That I felt like the beginning and the middle of that was really good. And the beginning was super good, the ending was pretty good, and the middle sucked.
I think everybody had fun, though.
Everybody had fun. That's the important part.
And it was a large group to manage again.
It was a large group, man. We started out
table.
like 8 or 9 or something like that. And I always feel like because it is magic and psionics, and it's this we can live off the land kind of thing, and in a fantasy world where most people, all these communities kind of live off the land anyways, I always feel it's kind of like I can't do a big apocalypse because I can't disconnect their cellular service or their internet. I can't break down their infrastructure. I mean, I guess I'm thinking about it wrong, because there is infrastructure in fantasy.
Yeah, there's trade.
There's trade and stuff like that.
Lots of trade.
But it doesn't feel, I don't know, for some reason I just feel like I can't break as much as I can with something more of a modern setting, you know.
Well, you got to look at say it's a village. Mm-hmm. So does this village have a blacksmith? If they don't, their metal goods are coming from somewhere else. If not even necessarily an apocalypse, but just travel between this place and the place where the nearest blacksmith is becomes incredibly dangerous, they become cut off. And you know how people get traditionally when they're isolated for long periods of time, they get kind of weird usually. So maybe they get a little weirdness into their customs, which I've seen in some supplements written in some pretty weird stuff about isolated towns and villages. You get a little deliverance going on sometimes.
I could see that. Maybe my problem is I try to do too big, because whereas something like that, what you're talking about, the apocalypse is more not necessarily locally bound,
but experienced.
But it's just experienced more on a local level. Whereas I kind of want to throw the net wide and then let everybody. You do
like your epic drama.
I do, which I'm trying to reel that in because
don't bother.
That's kind of sometimes it can be kind of a fault, especially if it's the same every game. Let's see how big Dave can throw the net. But I like to try to reel it in occasionally. And
I think that's a good balance. Is throw out this big picture, make sure everyone feels and experiences this global cataclysm, but then bring it in, like you say, to the players. How is it affecting them? Back to the house in the forest surrounded by zombies, basically.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. So I'm just going to hit this mark real quick because I'm not sure. So we may have already covered it, but what factors do you think make up a good apocalypse campaign, just in general?
Absolutely, first thing is tension. I mean, we're sitting at a table role playing a game, but we would all love to really feel some emotion from the story we're telling. So, it's obviously impossible to create that sort of tension and stress in real life that it would be experienced in real life in the game. So things like resource management tension, time management tension, basically any sort of resource the characters have access to gets cut back so that every decision matters. Teamwork, situations designed based on the characters where they either have to work together or die alone. I think that survival horror. Apocalypse game is a survival horror game, is it or is it not? I mean, I guess that's something for each individual GM to come up with. But in survival horror, resource management and time stress, those are big deals. I think that really comes into it. And like you're talking about, you brought up encumbrance, talking about Billy, that's a big deal. How much crap can you carry with you when you set off on your own to find a safer place or to rescue a buddy? How much crap can you carry? That is your encumbrance, is your resource limitation a lot of times, in addition to what you can find and replenish used resources.
In so many games, it's kind of and I do it too, it's kind of a hand wave on equipment sometimes, especially fantasy, because you can have magic bags of holding and stuff.
I'll occasionally do a spot check, and a lot of the guys that I play with, especially guys that have run games themselves, they really police themselves pretty well when it comes to that kind of stuff. They're like, I'm not going to carry ridiculous amounts of equipment because I physically couldn't. And they just don't cheat as much. I think
that's what's nice about experienced players and people who really want to experience the game, because those guys, I think, that want to cheat, want to fudge it more. I don't know. I think they're just trying to win the game, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
or
they're
doing something. But
you and I have played with players that are very motivated, very enthusiastic, very much into the combat and min-maxing characters, but at the same time, they still play their character as per the way they wrote it. They don't act out of character even within that min-max world.
They're fully in the RP, and they really want to be there, and I think that's really cool. And of course, I know me and you pull from the same player base as well,
which I think we're very lucky when it comes to that.
It really helps out immensely, I think. But what about for other game masters out there? Do you have any advice for them with maybe wrangling in their players for an apocalypse game, or just any advice in general before we wrap this particular discussion up? Although I do have something after this, though.
Goodness, advice.
Maybe just something quick.
I'm so wary of giving anyone else advice.
I mean, it's true, your mileage will vary.
Well, and so the reason I'm so wary of giving advice to other game masters, honestly, one is I've had it taken wrong before, as seen as, you don't think I'm good enough, so you're going to tell me how to do it.
Oh, I got you.
But, and people, not everyone can take criticism, even constructive criticism. But on that note, I would say look at what your strengths are and use your strengths. Be honest with yourself. What are your weaknesses? What can you do about it? I know one thing you and I both do is just read as much as we can. If we find somebody's GM advice in the front or the back of a book, or a book written for DMs, I mean, there's a lot of advice out there. And inundate yourself with as much fiction and steal as many good ideas as you can. Appendix N is there for a reason.
Yep. Absolutely. I cannot agree more. So finally, I think I'm going to come down to this last thing, just general subject matter. I know everybody runs their games differently, and of course a post-apocalyptic game can be very dark and very gritty, very questionable, very graphic, very controversial. So how do you feel about that? Like, where do you draw the line? What do you know is too much? You kind of see where I'm going.
I know that it's become popular to have, like, I've seen various techniques and systems for people to kind of opt out of certain subject matter. And honestly, I've never used anything or come across anything that offended any of my players that I'm aware of. But honestly, just saying, hey man, that's not cool, I don't want to game in that direction, I don't want to cover that subject matter, should be honestly enough. Try to get to know your players. I know sometimes you got new guys or guests, people you don't know that well, but just a simple statement of I'm uncomfortable with that should always be enough. I mean,
it should be accepted.
It's it's entertainment. Your job as a GM, I know you guys who are GMs who really love doing it. You get something out of it that's kind of hard to explain maybe sometimes, but your job is to entertain the players, to make sure everybody has a good time.
Yep.
And it comes down to that. You're an entertainer. You're a storyteller. Tell your story. Tell a story that your players want to hear.
Sounds good. Sounds like really good advice without being too specific. I like that.
I try to be vague so I can't be pinned down.
Well, James, I think we're come to the end of this particular discussion, and I want to thank you for coming out and having this discussion with me today. And
thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I hope you'll be able to come back for another one.
I hope I get invited back, but we'll see.
We will see. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I'm Dave Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild, telling you to stay safe, play great games, and we'll see you real soon.